I'm Francis, and if I had to describe what it was like growing up in my parents' house, I'd say it felt like living under a magnifying glass that never moved. Every step, every breath, every stumble was magnified until there was no room to just be. We lived in a small Ohio town where reputations carried more weight than truth, and people knew your business before you even finished living it. My parents fit right into that world. Their greatest fear wasn't failure or unhappiness, it was scandal. They'd rather sweep a problem under the rug than risk a neighbor whispering about it at church on Sunday. My dad was the kind of man who wore his authority like a uniform, even at home. As the high school principal, he'd perfected that permanent frown that could silence a classroom, and he never took it off. He ran our house with the same stiff rules: no elbows on the table, no backtalk, no excuses. Mistakes weren't lessons to him, they were offenses. Mom wasn't much softer. She was always fussing over appearances, my clothes, my posture, the volume of my laugh. What will people think, was her mantra, whispered under her breath like a prayer. To her, being proper wasn't just encouraged, it was survival. And then there was Chloe, my older sister. Chloe was everything they wanted in a daughter, polished to perfection. She got straight A's, signed up for every volunteer shift, and never once gave them a reason to doubt her. She wore her halo so naturally it was hard not to resent her. I was the opposite. I was the wildfire, the one who tested boundaries, slouched at the dinner table, and talked back just enough to remind them I wasn't theirs to mold. Sometimes I did it out of spite, sometimes out of desperation, but most of the time it was because I couldn't breathe under all their rules. Francis, sit up straight. A lady doesn't slouch. Dad's voice would cut through dinner like a whip. I'd roll my eyes, straighten just long enough to avoid another lecture, then sink back down the moment he turned his head. To them, it was rebellion. To me, it was survival, a tiny act of defiance in a house where everything else was dictated. Still, I dreamed, secret, fragile dreams I didn't dare share with anyone. I wanted to study marketing, move to a city where nobody knew my name, build a life that was mine from the ground up. But in my parents' house, dreams like that felt like contraband, something you had to hide under the mattress and only take out in the dark. And then I met Paul. I was 17, he was 20, a sophomore in college who seemed to carry the whole world in his easy smile. He wasn't from our circle, which was the first strike. He was laid back where my parents worshipped rigidity, charming where they preferred restraint. He made me feel seen, like I wasn't just the disappointment child in a suffocating house. We kept our relationship quiet, slipping away to the park by the river where the willow trees bowed low enough to hide us. There, for a few stolen hours, I wasn't the principal's daughter or the lesser sister, I was just me. We talked about everything: classes, music, what life might look like outside our town. I'd lie in bed later, picturing us in a little apartment, me chasing my degree, him waiting at home with takeout and laughter. It was naive, maybe even foolish, but it was mine. And then came the morning that changed everything. I was 19, a few months past my birthday, when I started waking up nauseous. At first, I blamed the stress of exams or bad diner food, but deep down, I knew, my body knew. One morning, before school, I ducked into the bathroom at the gas station on Main Street. The box with the pregnancy test felt like it burned a hole in my backpack the whole walk there. I locked the stall, unwrapped it with shaking hands, and waited under the buzzing fluorescent lights, my heart pounding so loud I thought it might echo off the tiles. And then there it was, 2 pink lines, positive. I took 5 more tests that week, hiding them in the bottom of my backpack, as if keeping them secret could make them untrue. Every single one said the same thing: I was pregnant. The days blurred, I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, my thoughts spun in endless circles. How would I finish school? What would Paul say? What about my parents? I avoided Paul for days, ignoring his calls, dodging his eyes when we passed, but I couldn't keep it from him forever. We met again at the river, the summer air heavy and still. He lit up when he saw me, but his smile faltered when he noticed my hands twisting nervously. Francis, what's wrong? He asked, reaching for me. I stepped back, arms wrapped tight around myself. I'm pregnant. The words fell heavy, like stones I'd been carrying for too long. His face flickered, shock, fear, and then something colder I hadn't expected. Are you sure? His voice was tight. I nodded, tears threatening to spill. 6 tests, all positive. He dragged a hand through his hair and started pacing, muttering curses under his breath. Then he stopped and looked at me. You need to get rid of it, Francis. Listen to me, an abortion's the only way. We're too young. This will ruin everything. His words landed like a slap. This was Paul, the boy I'd pictured building a life with, telling me to erase it like it was a mistake on paper. Get out, I whispered, my throat tight with rage and heartbreak. He didn't argue, he didn't fight for me, or for us, he just walked away, disappearing under the weeping branches of the willows, leaving me standing in the wreckage of everything I thought we were. Telling my parents was worse. I waited until after dinner, my hands clammy, my stomach knotted. Dad was in his armchair with the newspaper, Mom was fussing over the kitchen counter, and Chloe hovered like she knew something was coming. I need to tell you something, I said, my voice barely more than a whisper. Dad lowered the paper, eyes narrowing. What is it, Francis? My heart thudded painfully. I'm pregnant. The room erupted. Dad's face turned crimson, his voice booming with words like disgrace, shame, failure. Mom burst into tears, wringing her hands and moaning about the neighbors and the church. Chloe just stood there, arms crossed, her lips curled in contempt. You'll get an abortion, Dad said when he finally stopped shouting. We'll find a clinic. No one needs to know about this mess. I wanted to scream, to tell them it wasn't that simple, but their fury was impenetrable. A few days later, I found myself in a sterile doctor's office, Mom and Chloe flanking me like prison guards. The doctor, a woman with kind eyes, reviewed my chart and hesitated before speaking. Francis, she said gently, because of your medical history, an abortion could mean you'll never be able to have children again. Her words hit me like a punch. Never have children again. I wasn't letting them decide my future anymore. The drive home from the doctor's office was silent, but not the calm kind of silence. It was thick, choking, full of words unspoken but heavy in the air. I sat pressed against the passenger window, the glass cool against my forehead, watching the familiar streets blur past. Mom's knuckles were white around the steering wheel. Chloe sat in the back seat, scrolling on her phone like she wasn't even there. When we pulled into the driveway, Dad was already waiting. He stood on the porch, arms crossed, jaw set like he'd been rehearsing this moment. Well, he demanded. She refused, Mom said flatly, her voice laced with venom. Dad's expression hardened. He inhaled deeply through his nose, then exhaled in a slow, controlled breath. His voice was cold when he spoke. Pack your things and get out. You're not our daughter anymore. We won't have you shaming this family. Mom nodded in agreement, her eyes like flint. Chloe didn't look up from her phone. Something inside me cracked then, but I didn't let them see it. I ran to my room, my tears blurring everything as I yanked clothes from drawers and shoved them into my old duffel bag. My hands trembled so violently I could hardly zip it shut. As I slung it over my shoulder and reached for the doorknob, Dad's voice boomed down the hall. Don't come back. You're dead to us. The words cut deeper than any slap ever could. When the door slammed behind me, it echoed like a gunshot in the humid Ohio night. Just like that, I was 19, pregnant, and homeless. I stood on the sidewalk with my duffel bag at my feet, staring at the house I had lived in my whole life. The porch light glowed warmly behind me, but I knew I wasn't welcome in that glow anymore. The night air buzzed with crickets and cicadas, the world going on as if nothing had changed, but everything had. I had no plan. No safety net. Just a growing panic pressing against my ribs. And then I thought of Aunt Maggie. She was my dad's younger sister, the black sheep of the family, and proud of it. She and Uncle Ray lived in Columbus, a couple of hours away, running a bakery that always smelled like sugar and cinnamon. Where my parents preached rules and appearances, Maggie radiated warmth and laughter. They never fit into my parents' picture-perfect mold, and for that reason, we rarely saw them. But I remembered the way Aunt Maggie had always slipped me cookies under the table at Thanksgiving, winking like we shared a secret. My hands shook as I pulled out my phone and dialed her number. Francis, sweetie? Her voice came through the line, warm and familiar. What's wrong? The dam broke. I sobbed as I told her everything, Paul, the pregnancy, the ultimatum at the doctor's office, my parents kicking me out. There was silence on the other end, and I braced myself for the same rejection I'd just endured. But then her voice came steady, sure. Where are you right now? Outside their house, I whispered. Stay put, she said without hesitation. We're coming to get you. I sank onto the curb, clutching my bag to my chest. Relief and fear tangled inside me. I was safe for the moment, but the question still screamed in my mind. What would I do with this baby? How would I survive? When Maggie and Ray pulled up, headlights slicing through the night, I nearly collapsed into their arms. The drive to Columbus was long, the darkness outside thick and endless, but inside their car, there was no judgment. Maggie kept turning to check on me, her hand reaching back to squeeze mine. Ray drove in steady silence, his eyes on the road, his quiet presence like a shield. Their house was nothing like my parents'. It was a cozy brick bungalow with ivy climbing the porch and a jungle of potted plants cluttering the steps. Inside, it smelled like heaven, fresh bread, cinnamon, butter. The kind of smells that made you feel safe. Maggie tucked me into the guest room, wrapping me in a faded quilt that smelled faintly of vanilla. "You're safe here," she whispered, brushing hair from my damp cheeks. Ray carried my bag in and set it gently on the bed. "It's not much," he said with a shrug. "But it's yours." I looked around at the small room, a twin bed, an old dresser, lace curtains yellowed with age, and my throat tightened. "It's perfect," I said. The weeks that followed blurred together in a mix of exhaustion and strange new hope. Maggie took charge, dragging me to doctor's appointments, making sure I was eating, fussing over vitamins and hydration like a mother should have. She'd chatter endlessly about her bakery, the regulars who came in every morning, the new recipes she wanted to try, anything to distract me from the fear that sometimes threatened to swallow me whole. Ray was quieter, but just as steady. He'd slip extra pancakes onto my plate at breakfast, winking like it was our secret, or leave notes of encouragement tucked under my mug. One night, over a simple dinner at their scuffed wooden table, Maggie cleared her throat. "We've been talking," she said, glancing at Ray. I froze, bracing myself. "We want to help you keep going with school." I blinked at her, confused. "What do you mean?" Ray leaned forward, folding his hands. "We've saved money over the years. We never had kids of our own, so we'd like to use it to get you through college." My fork froze halfway to my mouth. I don't know what to say. Maggie's smile was warm, her eyes crinkling. "Say yes, Francis, this baby doesn't mean your dreams are over." Tears burned my eyes, spilling before I could stop them. For the first time since that gas station bathroom, I believed maybe she was right. I enrolled in a community college in Columbus, chasing the marketing degree I'd once only dared to dream about. It wasn't easy, morning sickness hit hard, and I often stumbled into class looking pale and half asleep. To help pay my way, I got a waitressing job at a small diner where the owner, Carla, was as tough as nails and twice as sharp. When I confessed I was pregnant, she just raised an eyebrow. "Been there, kid, we'll work around your schedule." The tips weren't great, but they kept food on the table and let me tuck a few dollars aside for the baby. As my belly grew, so did my determination. I'd lie awake at night, hand resting on the curve of my stomach, whispering promises to the little life inside me. I would make it work. I would be enough. And then came the day Caleb was born. Labor was brutal, hours of pain, fear, sweat, and tears, but when they finally laid him in my arms, tiny and perfect, with wide curious eyes and a soft coo that melted the air, I thought my heart might burst. Maggie and Ray were there, grinning like fools, their joy so big it filled the hospital room. "What's his name?" Maggie asked softly. I looked down at my son, his tiny fingers curling around mine. "Caleb," I whispered, "it means faithful, because no matter what anyone says, I know I made the right choice." Motherhood was chaos, sleepless nights, endless diapers, formula stains on my clothes, dragging myself to class with bleary eyes. The diner became my second home, where I learned to balance trays while reciting marketing terms in my head. Carla became a mentor, tough but fair, and whenever Caleb got sick or I had an exam, she rearranged schedules without complaint. There were days I thought I couldn't keep going, days the weight of school, work, and motherhood felt like too much, but then Caleb would smile, or Maggie would leave a note by my coffee mug that said, "You've got this," and somehow, I'd find the strength. I crossed the stage at graduation on a sunny afternoon, my cap slipping as I reached for my diploma. In the crowd, Maggie and Ray were cheering so loudly I could hear them above the roar, and there was Caleb, perched on Ray's shoulders, clapping with a grin that matched mine. Later, at the little party they threw in the bakery, balloons bouncing against the ceiling, cupcakes piled high, Carla pulled me aside. "Francis, I've got an offer," she said, her eyes twinkling. "I need a new manager for the diner. You're the one I want." I laughed, stunned. "Me? I'm just a waitress." She shook her head firmly. "No, you're more than that. I've watched you juggle customers, organize the staff, handle crises, all while raising a kid and finishing school. That's manager material." The promotion changed everything: steadier hours, better pay, a chance to put my degree to work by helping Carla market the diner. Soon Caleb and I moved into a tiny apartment of our own near the bakery. It wasn't much: peeling paint, leaky faucet, second-hand furniture, but it was ours. For the first time, it felt like I was building something real. And that's when I met David. It all began at one of Caleb's Little League games, a warm Saturday afternoon where the air smelled faintly of hot dogs and freshly cut grass. Parents filled the aluminum bleachers, clapping and calling out encouragement as the kids swung wildly at pitches. More energy than accuracy in every motion. Caleb stood at the plate, his little uniform slightly too big, his cap slipping sideways as he gripped the bat with all the determination in the world. His swings were enthusiastic, but his timing, well, let's just say he hadn't quite found it yet. I clapped anyway, because that's what you do when you're a mom, cheering as if every missed swing was just a step toward greatness. It was then I noticed a man a few rows down, tall and broad-shouldered but with an air of quiet reserve. His focus wasn't on the game itself but on a boy waiting in the dugout: dark hair, shy posture, a boy whose eyes lit up whenever the man called out encouragement. When the inning ended, the kids scattered back toward their teams, and I found myself seated beside the man. He smiled politely, the kind of smile that's soft around the edges, and I returned it. "Your boy's number 7? I asked, gesturing toward the dugout where his son sat tying his cleats. He nodded. "Lucas, he's on the other team." I laughed lightly. "Guess we're opponents then." That's how it started, casual conversation over a baseball game. I asked the question almost without thinking. "Single dad?" For a moment, his face changed, a shadow passing across it. "Widower, actually," he said quietly. "Lucas's mom passed away when he was still a baby." The words hit me with a pang, and I felt a deep ache for him and the boy. "I'm so sorry," I whispered. Then, after a pause, I added, "Single mom." I gestured toward Caleb, now tugging at his coach's sleeve. Something shifted in his expression, a flicker of recognition. He gave me a small, understanding smile. "It's tough," he said simply, "but we manage." And from there, we managed too, together. David and I didn't rush. Both of us carried our scars, his, raw with grief, mine, carved by betrayal. We started small: coffee after Saturday games, playdates at the park where Caleb and Lucas learned to share swings and snacks. Over time, I saw David differently, not just as a man, but as a father who overflowed with patience, with silly dad jokes, with encouragement that made both boys light up. Caleb adored him, looking to him for high fives after every game, and Lucas, quiet and thoughtful, began calling me Miss Francis, his shy smile slowly warming into trust. One evening, the boys were chasing fireflies in David's backyard, their laughter floating through the humid air. I sat beside him on the porch steps, our hands brushing until his fingers curled around mine. He cleared his throat, nerves written all over his face. "Francis," he said softly, pulling something from his pocket, a simple ring, "I want us to be a family." I didn't even let him finish. "Yes," I breathed, my heart surging. Our wedding was small and beautiful. Aunt Maggie and Uncle Ray sat in the front row, teary-eyed. A few friends from church filled the rest of the benches. Caleb, grinning ear to ear, carried the rings like it was the most important job in the world. Lucas, solemn but proud, held my hand as I walked down the aisle, under a canopy of string lights. David and I promised each other forever. A year later, forever grew. On a crisp spring morning, our daughter Mia arrived, her cries strong and her tiny fists waving. In that hospital room, with David's hand clasping mine, Caleb bouncing with excitement, and Lucas leaning close to meet his baby sister, I felt whole in a way I had never imagined. Blood didn't matter. Lucas was as much my son as Caleb and Mia. We were loud, messy, imperfect, and perfect all the same. Life unfolded in a whirlwind: school runs, baseball tournaments, art projects spread across the kitchen table, Mia's endless giggles echoing through the house. But then, one evening, while Aunt Maggie was folding laundry and the kids played in the living room, the television flickered with a news segment that froze me in place. There was my father, grayer now, but unmistakable, standing at a podium with a campaign banner behind him. his voice as polished and commanding as ever. The ticker at the bottom read, "Councilman John announces bid for mayor." He spoke of family values, his tone smooth, his gestures deliberate. Aunt Maggie's lips pressed into a thin line. "Hypocrites," she muttered under her breath. I frowned. "What do you mean?" She hesitated, then sighed heavily. "Francis, there's something you need to know." Her words unraveled a secret I could hardly comprehend. Before Chloe and I were born, my parents had another child, a son named Mark. He'd been born without legs, and instead of loving him, instead of standing proudly beside him, they had abandoned him at the hospital, erasing him from existence to preserve their spotless image. The ground seemed to tilt beneath me. A brother I'd never known, a brother discarded like I had been, though for different reasons. "Why didn't you tell me?" My voice shook, tears threatening. "I didn't want to hurt you more," Aunt Maggie whispered, "not after what they did to you." That night, lying awake with David's arm draped protectively around me, I made a decision. I had to find him. With David's support, we hired a private investigator. Weeks later, a lead emerged. Mark was alive, thriving. He had been adopted by a loving family, and now lived in Chicago, a motivational speaker and author. Meeting him was surreal. He rolled toward me in his wheelchair, his smile wide, his features so familiar it made my chest ache. "I always knew I had a family out there," he said as he pulled me into a hug. "I just never thought I'd find a sister." We spent hours talking, trading stories of lives lived apart yet somehow parallel. His wife, Anna, welcomed me with warmth, and his children tumbled into my lap as if I'd always belonged. Soon, Mark became a fixture in our lives, his laughter and wisdom filling the same rooms where Caleb studied, where Lucas painted, where Mia toddled with glee. The years passed, milestones marked in memories. Caleb earning a baseball scholarship, Lucas discovering his gift for art, Mia proudly sounding out her first words. But life had a way of circling back. One afternoon, scrolling through my phone, I stopped cold. Chloe's post blazed across my feed, thrilled to announce Paul and I are engaged. Paul, the man who had left me pregnant and alone, the father Caleb never knew. In the photo, he grinned beside Chloe, their arms entwined. My stomach churned with anger and betrayal, but then I glanced at Caleb, sketching quietly at the table, and realized something with sharp clarity. I didn't need their approval. My family, David, the kids, Mark, Aunt Maggie, Uncle Ray, was enough. And yet fate wasn't done. My father's face appeared again, this time in a city newspaper. He was giving an interview about family values, speaking smoothly as always. When asked about his children, he gave that practiced, gentle smile. "I have one daughter, Chloe," he said. "We lost another child, a tragedy we carry every day." Rage simmered through me. Lost? He hadn't lost me. He had thrown me away, just as he had done to Mark. When Mark invited me to his hometown book signing, I knew I had to go. The event was held at the grand ballroom of the fanciest hotel in town, filled with local leaders, reporters, and, at the front, as I had expected, my parents. My father sat tall, campaigning for mayor, my mother at his side, Chloe radiant as ever. They didn't notice me slip into the back. Mark rolled onto the stage to applause, speaking with calm strength about his life, his challenges, his triumphs, and then, with quiet conviction, he revealed the truth. I was born without legs. My biological parents abandoned me at the hospital, too ashamed to keep me. Gasps rippled through the room. My father's face hardened into his political mask, but I saw the cracks. Mark's gaze found me, but that's not the end. I found my sister, Frances, and she's here today. Frances, will you join me? Every head turned as I walked to the stage. My parents' faces drained of color. Chloe's lips parted in disbelief. I took the microphone, my voice steady though my heart pounded. "Mom, Dad, please stay," I said, as they began to shift in their seats. "It's time for the truth." And I told it, all of it, how they abandoned Mark, how they cast me out at 19, pregnant and terrified, because I refused to bow to their image, how they erased us, just as they preached family values from their podium. "They talk about family values," I said, my voice carrying through the hushed room, "but they abandoned 2 of their children." The ballroom erupted, shouts, whispers, reporters scribbling furiously. My father shrank in his chair, my mother's face buried in her hands. Chloe sat frozen, unable to meet my eyes. The scandal spread like wildfire. My father's mayoral campaign collapsed within days. His career, once untouchable, crumbled to dust. Chloe called me once, her voice bitter and sharp. "You've destroyed us, you're dead to me." I let her words hang, then hung up. Paul called too, voice soft, almost pleading. Julie and I can't have kids, he confessed. We have Caleb, maybe we could be a family. I laughed, a sound full of release. You made your choice years ago, Paul. I already have a family, and it's not you. I ended the call, the weight of him finally lifting. But then came a surprise. Paul's mother, Diane, reached out. Is it true about Caleb? She asked, her voice trembling. Do we have a grandson? They had been told I'd had an abortion, lied to by Paul and my parents. The truth broke her heart. At last, I agreed to let them meet Caleb. It was emotional, filled with tears and regret, but also with hope. Caleb, with his big heart, welcomed them without hesitation. Life settled again into its imperfect rhythm. Mark and his family became part of our fabric. Aunt Maggie and Uncle Ray remained our anchors. My parents and Chloe faded, moving away to escape their disgrace. And me? I stood tall. I had spoken the truth. Because family, real family, isn't built on lies, or appearances, or perfection. It's built on love, resilience, and the courage to fight for both. To everyone who's followed this journey, thank you. You've walked with me through heartbreak, betrayal, and the fight to rebuild. If my story touched you, hit that subscribe button and join us. Every scar tells a story of resilience, love, and truth. Keep fighting for your own truth, and I'll see you at the finish line.